After my husband's death, my son was my constant support, until the night he knocked over his father's portrait and roared, "This charade is over." When my husband, Jean-Luc, passed away, I thought my world would collapse. But in those darkest months, I realized how fortunate I was. I wasn't alone. My daughter, Camille, despite her busy university schedule, spent almost all her free time by my side. Every weekend morning she would come home, brew me a hot cup of tea. Her devotion was my greatest comfort. And Etienne, my busy son, also warmed my heart. Though his business in the city consumed him, he drove home almost every weekend to visit. He always brought bouquets of peonies, my favorite flowers, and patiently listened to my old stories for hours. He asked about my health, about Camille's studies, about everything. Seeing my two children, one caring for me nearby, the other traveling long distances to visit, I felt like the happiest mother alive. I had a solid foundation. The pain of losing Jean-Luc was still there, but my children's love helped me stand strong. I believed that we were a real family, united and loving. I believed I would live out my final years in this peace. But then, cracks began to appear. About a year ago, Etienne started complaining about his business. "My company is going bankrupt, mother," he said, his voice full of dejection during one visit. At the same time, he began to inquire about Jean-Luc's assets. "Father was such a shrewd banker," he said. "Surely he must have left something behind. A secret account? Some investments you don't know about?" I answered him honestly, which was what I believed at the time. "No, Etienne. Your father invested everything in his company, and after he passed, there was just enough to get by. Besides this house and your 2 scholarship funds, we have nothing else." I repeated that answer many times, and I noticed that after each time, Etienne's attitude grew a little colder. The bouquets of peonies became less frequent. The calls grew fewer. His concern vanished, replaced by irritability and distance. I tried to tell myself it was due to work pressure, but the peace I had once felt was slowly dissolving. That coolness climaxed one Friday evening. Etienne burst into the house, reeking of alcohol. His face was etched with the despair and fury of someone who had lost all patience. He threw a stack of debt collection notices onto the dining table. "The play's over, old woman," he roared, no longer calling me mother. "All these years I've had to play the dutiful son, listening to your meaningless ramblings, all for nothing. You and that old man, both useless and penniless." He turned to me. "Withdraw the money from Camille's scholarship fund. Immediately. I need it." I put down my knife and fork, looking him directly in the eyes. "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "That's your sister's future." Etienne let out a dry, distorted laugh, twisted by alcohol and resentment. "Future? Her future is to marry some bum and be a parasite just like you." He slammed his hand on the table, standing up, the chair clattering as it fell back. "Do you know?" he yelled, his drunkenness shattering all semblance of civility. "The day that old man had his heart attack, I was there." What was he saying? I sat stunned, his words like broken glass piercing my mind. I begged him, just a little, to pay off my gambling debts, but he refused. He pointed to my wedding photo with Jean-Luc. He lay there, clutching his chest, gasping for breath. His medicine was right on the table. He wouldn't have died if I wanted him to. But I thought, if he dies, at least I'll get an inheritance. But no, in the end, just useless poor people. He wouldn't have died if I wanted him to. That sentence hit me like a hammer blow. He wasn't just there. He witnessed it. He could have saved his father. And he chose to do nothing, all because of gambling debts. Camille quickly stood up, her voice trembling, shielding me. "Stop it! What are you saying? Get out!" Etienne roared, and a deafening slap echoed in the silent space. She fell to the floor. That violent act was like a lightning strike, jolting me out of my stupor. I saw the true monster standing before me. He didn't stop. He advanced, snatching my handbag. "Where's that savings book? I need money. They'll kill me if I don't pay." "What are you doing, Etienne?" Camille sobbed, her voice lost. "Get out of my life," he bellowed, finally finding the savings book. He took the book. Before leaving, he flung a glass of red wine at our wedding photo. The dark red liquid streamed down our happy faces, like a bleeding wound. "Thanks for raising me," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, then threw a few loose bills at my feet. "That's your tip." He turned and walked straight out the door, leaving a shattered silence. After that horrific night, Etienne disappeared. He had gotten the savings book, and I no longer wanted to see his face. Nearly 2 years passed in heavy silence, a silence I tried to fill by caring for Camille. Then one morning I received a call from Mr. Dubois, the family lawyer. "Madame Elise," he said, his voice solemn. "It has been exactly 2 years since Mr. Jean-Luc's passing. According to his wishes, it is time for us to execute a special clause in his will. Please be present with your children at my office tomorrow afternoon." I was stunned, holding the phone speechless. A special clause? Jean-Luc had never told me about this. My heart pounded, a feeling of both anxiety and curiosity rising within me. The next day, at the lawyer's office, I saw Etienne again. He looked thinner and more haggard, but his eyes still held arrogance. When Camille bowed her head in greeting, he merely nodded dismissively. He surely thought this was a meeting to divide the remaining assets, and he came to claim his share. He looked at me with smugness, as if I had been afraid and called him back to divvy things up. "Mr. Dubois began, his voice grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, as per Mr. Jean-Luc's request, this will was only to be revealed 2 years after his death." He opened a leather briefcase, retrieving a sealed document. The will explicitly states, he read, that upon my passing, all of my true assets, he emphasized the word true, will be secretly managed by a trust fund. I was stunned, turning to look at Mr. Dubois. All of his true assets? I had always thought we only had the house and the scholarship funds. Jean-Luc had never told me about any other trust fund. A sense of shock washed over me. Etienne burst out laughing, a joyous and brazen sound that cut through my thoughts. "Ha ha! I knew it. I knew that old man couldn't have had nothing. He hid his assets well." He slammed his hand on the table, then turned to me and Camille with a commanding look. "See? I told you. My patience has finally paid off." While Etienne was celebrating, I felt an infinite weariness. Money again. Assets again. His greed had resurfaced, even more naked than 2 years prior. I no longer had the strength to contend. I just wanted this to be over. "For 2 years," Mr. Dubois continued, his eyes not leaving the will, "Madame Elise will continue to manage the ordinary assets. After 2 years, Madame Elise has the right, a single time, to declare relinquishment of management of the entire estate." Etienne immediately turned to me, his eyes urging, impatient. "Mother, did you hear? Relinquish your rights. Hurry, so the assets can be legally divided among the children." He was right. I didn't want to be involved anymore. I didn't want to face this greedy monster for another day. I was too tired. I looked at Camille. She also looked exhausted. "Mr. Dubois," I said, my voice full of weariness, "I don't want to manage anything anymore. I am too old and tired." I turned to Etienne. "You want the assets, don't you? Fine. Let them be divided legally. And then," I said, like a final shedding of burden, "I, Elise von Schmidt, officially relinquish my right to manage the assets." Etienne smiled triumphantly. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, awaiting his victory. But Mr. Dubois continued, "According to the final clause of the covenant, when and only when Madame Elise relinquishes her management rights, this sealed envelope will be opened. The letter inside will identify the sole and legal heir to the entire estate. The smile on Etienne's face froze. Sole? He stammered, sitting upright. I was also stunned. Sole? Jean-Luc. Did you even account for this? How deep did your plan run? Mr. Dubois, with solemnity, picked up the red wax-sealed envelope from the table. He carefully broke the seal. He withdrew a single sheet of paper, unfolded it, and read aloud the name written on it. Camille von Schmidt. The smile on Etienne's face shattered. He sat frozen in his chair, motionless as a statue. His smugness, his greed, all vanished. All that remained was the naked collapse of a king just dethroned on a throne he thought was his. The deathly silence in the meeting room was torn by a furious roar. Etienne sprang to his feet, the chair clattering as it toppled backward. His face was flushed crimson, his eyes wide with rage and disbelief. "No way!" he screamed, pointing at me. "This is a fraud. You manipulated father. You conspired with this old lawyer to steal what belongs to me." Mr. Dubois stood up, his voice stern. "Mr. Etienne, please calm down. This is your father's legal will." "Legal?" Etienne laughed maniacally. "A will that gives an entire fortune to a brat who hasn't even graduated, while disinheriting the only son." He turned to me, his eyes filled with hatred. "You think you've won? Not yet. I will sue in court to reclaim what is rightfully mine. I will show everyone that you have lost your mind." I looked at him, my son consumed by greed. One last time I tried. "Etienne, don't," I said, my voice weary. "Don't sue. It's useless. It won't benefit you at all." But he merely sneered, suspicion and contempt clear in his eyes. "Useless? You're scared, aren't you? Scared I'll win, scared I'll get the inheritance, aren't you? You can't fool me." He didn't understand that I was trying to save him from the ultimate truth, a truth even more painful than losing money. He just thought I was trying to protect the fortune for myself. While Etienne was wildly screaming, Camille sat beside me, trembling. She wasn't looking at the huge numbers on the papers. She just looked at her brother, then at me, pained by the raw dissolution of our family. Etienne slammed his hand on the table one last time and stormed out of the room, leaving a lingering threat. "You will regret this. We'll meet in court." The door slammed shut. I had given him one last chance to stop, and he refused. The battle had officially begun. Etienne kept his word. Exactly 1 week later, I received a court summons. My son had actually sued his own mother, accusing me of legal incapacity and asking the court to invalidate my relinquishment of management decision. On the day of the trial, the courtroom atmosphere was solemn and cold. I sat at the defendant's table with Mr. Dubois and Camille. She clutched my hand tightly, her hand icy cold. Opposite us, Etienne sat with his lawyer, a slick and cunning man. He didn't look at me, only stared straight at the judge with the resolute expression of a victim, and his performance began. Etienne's lawyer stood up, beginning to weave an emotional story. He portrayed Etienne not as a greedy person, but as a devoted, dutiful son who had spent years caring for his elderly mother after his father's death. "Your Honor," he said, his voice full of sympathy, "my client has always been by his mother's side. He put aside his own opportunities to visit her regularly." He began to present evidence, one by one. Photographs of Etienne bringing me flowers, his smile looking genuinely sincere. Invoices for expensive gifts. Call logs showing he had called me almost weekly for 2 years. "These are the actions of a son who loves his mother," his lawyer concluded. But then, abruptly and inexplicably, Madame Elise decided to strip him of his entire inheritance, an illogical act which can only be explained by a decline in mental faculties due to age and grief. My client is not suing for money. He is suing out of concern for his mother. He only wants to protect her from her own misguided decisions. It was a perfect performance. They had turned Etienne's fake emotional investment into proof of devotion. They were trying to paint me as a senile, bitter old woman who had abandoned her loving son. I sat silently listening, feeling the judge's scrutinizing gaze. Their play was very convincing, but they didn't know that I also had a play of my own. And the best act was yet to come. After Etienne's lawyer finished his emotional presentation, the judge turned to me. Madame Elise, do you have anything to say? I slowly stood up. I didn't look at the judge. I didn't look at the lawyer either. I looked directly at Etienne, who sat confident that he was about to win. I didn't defend my actions. I didn't explain my weariness or disappointment. Instead, I posed a question, my voice clear in the courtroom's silence. Etienne, have you ever wondered why your father, a man who loved you so dearly, created such a strange and somewhat cruel clause in his will? Etienne frowned, a little confused by my question. His lawyer started to object, but the judge motioned him to sit down. What are you trying to say? Etienne asked, his voice a little irritable. I'm asking you, I continued. Why did your father set up a test, and why did he give me full decision-making power? I didn't wait for his answer. I turned to Mr. Dubois. Mr. Dubois, please present the next exhibit to the court. Mr. Dubois stepped forward, placing a large envelope on the judge's bench. Your Honor, this is the result of a secret DNA test conducted at my client's request, comparing the DNA sample of Mr. Etienne and the deceased father, Mr. Jean-Luc. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Etienne shot to his feet. What? DNA? You had to resort to such dirty tactics? He laughed maniacally. You think a fake piece of paper can change anything? I am his son. No, Etienne, I said, my voice now devoid of anger, only deep sorrow. You are not. The judge opened the envelope, reviewed the results, then looked up at me with astonishment. The entire courtroom fell silent. Etienne and Camille were stunned. And then, I told the truth, a secret I had buried for 30 years. Jean-Luc created that clause, I said, my voice trembling, because he knew you are not his biological son. I revealed everything. Etienne was the son of myself and a former lover. When I became pregnant, Jean-Luc discovered it. Instead of divorcing, he proposed a covenant. He looked at me and said that a child was innocent. He would accept Etienne, give him his name, love, and raise him as his own. In return, I had to swear never to let this secret affect Camille, his only biological daughter. I turned to look at Etienne, who was stunned, like a stone statue. Jean-Luc kept his promise, I said, my voice now sharp with indignation. He gave you a name, a family, a life you should never have had. He loved you with everything he had. I paused, taking a deep breath. And how did you repay him? By letting him die of a heart attack, all because of gambling debts, by trampling on the future of your own sister, the daughter he loved most. A person like you, I said, my voice full of resolve, does not deserve anything from the legacy of that great man. I looked at the judge, then back at Etienne, the final pieces of the puzzle suddenly becoming clear in my mind. Now I understand, I said, my voice carrying a profound realization. I myself did not know about the existence of that huge trust fund. I had always thought we had nothing. Perhaps Jean-Luc did it intentionally. He hid that fortune from all of us. This strange will clause, I continued, the deductions flowing, was not just a test for you, Etienne. Perhaps it was also a test for me. He wanted to see if, with nothing in my hands when faced with your cruelty, I would be strong enough to protect Camille. He gave me the final decision-making power, trusting that I would do the right thing. I looked directly into my son's eyes. And your actions that night? You personally signed your own condemnation and clearly showed me the path Jean-Luc wanted me to choose. After my testimony, The entire courtroom fell into a heavy silence. All eyes turned to Etienne. His performance had completely collapsed. The fabricated dutiful son evidence presented by his lawyer now seemed ridiculous. The judge, without another word, delivered her verdict. Case dismissed, she declared, her voice firm. Etienne no longer screamed. He was no longer angry. He just sat there, motionless, like an empty shell. He had lost everything in one afternoon. The enormous fortune he had just learned about, the honor of being a son, and most painfully, the very identity he had always proudly carried. He was not a von Schmidt. He was just an adopted stepchild, an ungrateful wretch who had personally destroyed the kindness he had received. When the trial ended, he quietly stood up. He didn't look at me, nor at Camille. He just walked away, trudging like a ghost, out of the courtroom. He left the courthouse and disappeared from our lives forever. That evening, after the chaos had subsided, Camille gently knocked on my bedroom door. She entered, holding a hot cup of chamomile tea, just as she always did. But this time, something was different. She didn't ask about money, or the trust fund, or the future. She just sat down beside the bed, placed the tea on the table, and looked at me. Her clear eyes, so like Jean-Luc's, held a deep understanding I had never seen before. "Mother," she whispered, "how long have you lived with this secret?" That simple question, not an accusation but a shared empathy, broke down the wall I had built around my heart for 30 years. Tears began to stream down my cheeks. I told her everything, about the pain, the guilt, and the burden of keeping my promise to her father, about Jean-Luc's love and his sacrifice. Camille just listened silently, her hand clutching mine, warming me. When I finished, she hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Mother," she sobbed. "I'm sorry I didn't realize. I'm sorry you had to endure it alone." In that embrace, I felt the burden of 30 years disappear. Our mother-daughter relationship was no longer a one-sided care from a devoted daughter to an elderly mother. It had become empathy, understanding, and a strong support for each other. We had lost a husband, a father, a brother, but in that loss, we had truly found each other. In the months that followed, Camille matured remarkably. The weight of the inheritance didn't crush her. On the contrary, it seemed to ignite the flame of responsibility Jean-Luc had seen in her. With my guidance and Mr. Dubois', Camille began to learn how to manage the estate. She not only looked out for her own future, but also wanted her father's legacy to carry a greater meaning. A year after the trial, I sat in the front row of a luxurious auditorium. On stage, Camille, in an elegant gown, stood confidently at the microphone. She was no longer the timid girl she once was. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice rang out, warm and strong. "Today, we launch the Elise Foundation. The foundation is named after my mother, a woman who taught me about the power of silence, resilience, and forgiveness." She looked down at me, smiling. "The Elise Foundation will dedicate all its resources to providing legal and financial support for single mothers and their children who have suffered betrayal and injustice. Because the greatest legacy we can leave is not money, but hope and strength for those who come after us." I looked at my daughter, the true heir of both blood and Jean-Luc's honorable legacy, shining brightly. I knew my husband, somewhere, was smiling. His game of chess was over, and true love had won.